Thank you. Hi, my name is Grant Weerts. I'm an 11th grader at Osceola Valley High School. I've been doing CAD since 6th grade, and I'm a certified associate for SolidWorks, which is a CAD program. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can put them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them at the end. So what is 3D printing? Well, a 3D printer uses a roll of plastic in order to create a 3D object based off of a CAD design. So what is CAD? CAD stands for Computer Assisted Design, which is basically a fancy way of saying designing things on a computer. And how is CAD used? CAD is used by engineers when they are creating new products like toys or houses, so they can see how what they are making will look before building it. As you can see in this model of a building, CAD allows us to plan and look at all parts of a design, even on the inside. And how can you CAD? Well, there are many different programs that you can get for your computer that will help you CAD. All of these programs use a system of sketching to create the basic design of the part, and then features are used in order to create the 3D part of the design by stretching the sketch or rotating it. Now time for some CAD basics. Every CAD design starts with a sketch, which is used to create basic 2D designs of the object that you are trying to create. This is similar to a drawing that you would do on a piece of paper. Then we can use that sketch to start creating features. For instance, you can see that the wings of this plane stick out the sides. These wings were once a sketch that have been changed from two-dimensional or 2D to three-dimensional or 3D. How does 3D printing work? Well, 3D printing is done using, drumroll please, a 3D printer. The 3D printer heats up plastic so much that it starts to melt and turns into less of a solid and more of a liquid, kind of like toothpaste. This melted plastic is then pushed out onto a flat surface from the heater, also known as the extruder, where it begins to harden again. Once the plastic finishes its cooling process, another layer can be added on top of it, which is how these little layers turn into a 3D part. This is a picture of a 3D printer creating an object. You can see how the layers stack up on top of each other. The layer height of a 3D print can also be made bigger or smaller depending on what the 3D print is for. If you need a very precise part that needed to fit together with something else, you might want to print the object with a very small layer height so that the final product will be closer to what you created in CAD. If you're creating something that you wanted to print quickly or you wanted it to be very strong, you could choose to print it with a bigger layer height. Notice how the lines are thin in the first stack and get bigger as you move across the screen. 3D printers come in various sizes, with some small enough to fit on a table and others large enough to print a house. They also use different materials to print with. I talked about printing with plastic earlier, but others use cement or even titanium, which is a really lightweight but strong metal. 3D printing is being used in the construction industry in order to build houses quickly and cheaply. Since cement dries like plastic and has a liquid state like melted plastic, it can be printed like plastic. This process involves a 3D printer that is as big as a house. On the left you can see what something like this would look like, and on the right you can see some walls that were 3D printed for a house out of cement. In Plattsburgh, Norsk Titanium is using titanium to print parts very precisely for airplanes and spaceships. 3D printing on the International Space Station. As you can probably imagine, when astronauts go into space, there isn't a lot of room for extra stuff. If parts break or they realize they forgot something, it isn't easy for NASA to get it to them quickly, just like they said in the Downlink this morning. 3D printing in space will hopefully cut down on the number of resupply missions needed with spare parts, because the 3D printer would allow these parts to be made on board the space station. This small ratcheting wrench on the left was the 21st object to be 3D printed in space, and the first item to be CAD designed on Earth and emailed to the ISS. You can see how accurate a 3D printer has to be in order for this intricate wrench, which has moving parts that need to fit exactly into the space so that they can turn, In the second picture, these small fittings and couplings are more examples of items that the astronauts needed. Now we're going to use CAD to create a 3D model of a rocket ship. But first we're going to talk about some more basics in CAD. So I'm going to go share that screen. Okay, so first I'm going to create a sketch. All the parts that I'm going to design start with a sketch, as well as most parts that you would ever have to design. So I can just choose where I want my sketch to be, and then I can create a rectangle so that I can create a cubic shape when I'm done. So I'm just going to drag that point out there, and then that's all I have to do with that sketch, since now I have the basics. So what I can do now is I can just rotate this so I can see it from the top down. And now I can do what's called an extrude, and this basically just stretches that sketch upward and it creates a 3D shape out of that. So I can click on that, and then I can move this arrow upward, and then I can create that 3D shape. Okay, so I'm good with that, so I can press OK. And then I can draw whatever shape I want on top of this. So I'm going to draw a smiley face. So I'm going to make two eyes, so two circles there, one there and one there. And then I create a smile for the smiley face. So I can just select some points, and then it'll create that shape. So that's all I have to do with that sketch. So then I can use this extrude feature again, which, if you remember, it just stretches that sketch. And I'm actually going to use this to cut into the earlier shape we made. So I can drag the arrow this way, and you'll see that red there. That means it's cutting into the shape. So I can press OK when I'm good with that. And you can see I have a little box there with a smiley face on top of it. Okay, so now we can move on to the rocket. So in order to create this rocket, I'm going to create a sketch again. And I can start by just creating a line that I can base my design around. So I'll move that upward, and I can just press the check mark. And then I'm going to use a curvy line so that I can create the basic one half of the rocket ship. So I'm going to drag down there, and then I can put a point somewhere there, and I can do one there. And that's all I have to do with that. So what I can do now is I can make this point go side to side so that it'll meet up with its other half better. And then that's all I have to do for that sketch. So once I'm here with my sketch, I'm going to use another feature, which is called Revolve. And what Revolve does is it takes this sketch here and it moves it around this line so that it'll create a 3D shape that's rotated. So I can press Revolve, and then I can press that line I just talked about, and it'll create that 3D shape right there. Kind of looks like a teardrop. So I can press OK, and then I can rotate again, and I can start creating the fins. So to do that, I'm just going to use another line and in this other sketch, and I can move this line down and then just outline the basic shape of the fin that I want. So something like that. So then what I can do is I want that fin to actually be a 3D shape. So I'm just going to want to use that extrude again, and I can just drag these arrows out, and it'll create a shape that has a width. So right there. So there's one fin. Now in order to get this fin around the rest of the rocket, what I can do is something called a pattern. So I can click on a pattern, and then I can click on that fin, and then I can just rotate that around the rocket like so. Okay. So I'm good with that. So now we have our basic rocket. And then if I ever wanted to change something, like if I wanted smaller fins, I could go back here and I could just go to edit this sketch, and then you'll see I'm back here and I can just drag these lines and make a smaller fin like that. So then I can just go there and you see it updates. Okay, so what I can do now is I'll show you some more advanced things that have been done with CAD. So on our robotics team that I'm a part of, we worked on designing our robot in CAD. So it uses many parts, and these are all assembled together in this design. This robot is about 18 inches wide, which is about this big, and that is why it's so useful to have CAD when designing this, because it allows us to visualize how all of these parts are going to go together, and it lets us design before we actually build things. So I'll rotate around this a little more. You can see the bottom. We've got some wheels here. And then there's the rest of it. Okay. One second, let me get my screen sharing up again. Okay, so now we're going to look at a time lapse of this rocket ship being printed on a 3D printer. So while this video is only 45 seconds long, this object actually took around an hour to print. And while it's playing, you can see how the printer creates one layer on top of the other. Notice that the inside of the rocket ship has a grid pattern, and this is created so that the rocket is not hollow and it actually has some strength. The part that the plastic is coming out of at the top is called the extruder, like I mentioned before. This is the part of the printer that heats up the plastic and puts it down in layers very precisely. You can also see that it moves back and forth on the rail up there, and that just lets it move around to go where it needs to go. Okay. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat now, or you can email me at the email provided on screen. Thank you for coming. And before you go, I also have, here's the finished rocket that I printed right here. So you can see just how I can squeeze it. It's pretty solid. And yeah. So if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat.